How can an all-knowing, all-loving God allow suffering? If God is so good, why is the world so bad? If God knows everything, why does he allow evil to happen?
This seems like the perfect opportunity to slice with Occam's razor, because all things being equal, the simplest solution is most likely the correct one. Now, which one sounds simpler to you? That there is an all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful deity out there that has a plan for everybody that sometimes includes suffering, or that the universe is an unguided place and that bad shit happens with no premeditation whatsoever? Which one sounds simpler? Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers, BionicDance here. And hey, look, it's our good old friend State of Daniel. And he's got a few things to say about the problem of the problem of evil. Let's have a look.
From my personal experience, there are 3 steps to handling the problem of evil. Number 1, we have to remember that evil isn't a thing. I used to envision evil as darkness, or this brooding spiritual entity.
So, basically, the dark side of the Force. Okay.
But the reality is that these mental images are a little misleading.
Well, the truth is you are correct. Evil is not a thing. Evil is behavior. Evil is things that people do that hurt others. And I suppose if you want to go there, evil can be the thoughts that lead them to do those things. But thoughts can be resisted and not acted upon. So there's a little gray area there as far as whether thoughts can be evil.
You see, God created everything, and everything God created is good.
Really? Do you have any evidence for that, or is it just something you were told and never questioned? Frankly, whenever somebody tells me that God is always good, it doesn't sound like reality, it doesn't sound like the truth, it sounds like propaganda.
If we view evil as a thing, then we naturally blame God for its existence.
Oh, believe me, I don't need to picture evil as a thing to lay the blame for a lot of it at your God's feet, assuming the fucker's even real.
Instead, we need to remember that evil isn't a thing, it's a wrong choice. It's the consequences of a wrong choice.
Oh yeah, we agree on this point. Evil is the result of behavior. But where I think we probably disagree is, assuming scripture isn't a steaming pantload of bulldreck, well, your God has done a lot of things that paint him as an evil rat bastard. I mean, come on, what kind of douchebag deity just leaves the tree of the knowledge of good and evil sitting there where any schmuck can grab its fruit? You telling me that wasn't deliberate? Come on. Or how about when God decides to orbital strike Sodom? No, don't look back. Don't watch the amazing spectacle of an entire city being wiped off the face of the earth. Don't look, don't. Oh, you looked. Sorry, pillar assault time. I mean, come on, who doesn't know that telling someone to not indulge their curiosity is going to make them far more curious? Everybody knows that. This had to be deliberate. And really, what's the problem with watching an allegedly evil city be destroyed? How is that a problem? And are you really going to tell me that Noah's flood was a good thing? That it wasn't evil? I mean, okay, apparently humanity had lost its way and started behaving like a bunch of jerkwads, but rather than taking the time to try and work out their problems to help them reform, God takes the easy way out and presses the reset button. He says basically, I can't deal with you anymore, stop it with the misbehaving. That's it, I'm just gonna kill the lot of you except for this floating menagerie over here. Sorry, thanks for playing. I mean, think about it. Hundreds of millions, possibly billions of deaths just because God couldn't take the time to put humanity in the corner till they could learn to behave themselves. This is good to you? This isn't evil? And yet you'll still get religious people trying to claim that everything God does is good and wise and just. And I'm sitting here thinking, are you people deluded or stupid? Or both? Or all 3?
Now, there are going to be some people out there who say, if God is the origin of free will, and free will creates room for sin, then can't we blame God for evil? No. Think of it this way, you wouldn't blame parents for the choices of their children, even though they're the origin of their children, right?
That seems a rather simplistic view. It's more than just whether or not they were born to those parents. How they were raised by those parents can have a lot to do with that kid's behavior later in life.
You wouldn't blame the Wright brothers for 9/11 just because they're the origin of airplanes.
Well, no, you wouldn't. But given that we're talking about evil behavior and not the devices used in the commission of that behavior, this is a really bad example.
Yes, God is the origin of free will, but it's the people who make evil choices that deserve the blame.
And yet it was God who just left that apple of good and evil lying around where any old schmuck could take a bite out of it. If nothing else, God's a bit of an enabler.
Number 2, not all suffering is bad, and God actually uses suffering for good. The fallacy that a lot of people make is that if they can't see or imagine a good reason for something, there must not be one. But this sort of mindset is blind faith of the highest order.
Wow, a Christian criticizing people for having blind faith. Hypocrite much? And can't an all-loving, all-powerful God get the job done using a method other than suffering?
Think of the story of Joseph and the coat of many colors. You know, his brothers threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. He was brought into a foreign land, pleaded to God for help, but he was still forced into bondage and misery.
So what we've got here is a sin of omission. In Catholic teaching, an omission is a failure to do something one can and ought to do. If this happens advertently and freely, it is considered a sin. God just looked at this poor guy getting tortured and went, doesn't matter. I don't care. Keep hurting. So according to Catholic doctrine at least, God is guilty of at least one sin.
No one would have blamed Joseph had he abandoned his faith or blamed God for his suffering, but instead he allowed these trials to refine his character.
And much like with Noah's flood, God couldn't have chosen a better, less painful method? How about just having the guy born with the traits of compassion, empathy, and self-assurance that he would need to become the Prime Minister of Egypt? Huh? I mean, I realize that, for whatever reason, you Christians seem to have a fetish for persecution and suffering, but would you really want that if there was any way you could avoid it?
But Joseph would have never become an agent for social change if it weren't for his suffering and if it weren't for his brothers betraying him and throwing him into a pit.
Oh, really? Where's your evidence of that? Do you have some sort of quantum time machine that allows you to view alternate timelines so you can see what would have happened without the pit torture? Do you? And I feel the need to reiterate the fact that I'm only having this discussion as a hypothetical, as if Scripture weren't a steaming load of garbage. It's no different than if I were to say, what if Miles Verkosigan's mother hadn't been exposed to that toxic gas that made him deformed in the womb? Would he still be the military genius he grew up to be?
Atheists and those who wrestle with the problem of evil are actually right. God is not off the hook for the evil and suffering in this world.
Okay, wasn't expecting that. Where are you going with this?
But we need to take it another step further. God is the hook, and that's why we lay our burdens on the cross.
Okay, that makes no sense. God's not off the hook, but he is the hook? So what, we're supposed to trust God to punish himself for his own misdeeds? I don't know about you, but I think those of us who've been hurt are about to be cheated out of any kind of justice.
We can never fully understand why God allows evil and suffering to exist in this world, but when we look at the cross, we're reminded that God loved us so much and that he takes our suffering so seriously that he took it upon himself.
So let me see if I got this right. God tortured himself by proxy in order to absolve us of sins that he essentially goaded us into doing with that apple incident. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So once again, I'm forced to fall back on Occam's razor, because really, which makes more sense? This convoluted fairy tale of original sin, torture, death, resurrection, and God hurting us for our own good? Or there is no God and shit happens? Which of those is the simplest, most reasonable answer, and the one that most closely matches the world we live in?
When we embrace these teachings, we're reminded that God is with us, even during the most difficult and trying times of our lives.
And I'm sure that's very comforting. But you know how they say that God helps those who help themselves? Which has always sounded remarkably to me like, if you do it yourself, who needs God? If you have the confidence and ability to get through those trying times all on your own, well, you may not have the comfort and security of knowing that there's some all-powerful father figure ready to catch you if you fall. Yeah, that may be scarier. At least you're taking responsibility and dealing with your own shit. No God required. When you look at it objectively, the problem of evil, the question of why do bad things happen to good people, is really the problem of it's not fair, which is the complaint of a child. Think about it. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.